What the hell is this? If you're a DM who doesn't like metagaming, you should consider why. Most of the time, it's insecurity about not being smarter than your party members or clever enough to work through obstacles in life. Players should be able to use whatever they have available to gain an advantage over the DM, and if you can't handle that as a DM, you might not be cut out for the role with that play group. The worst thing isn't the stupidity. The worst thing is that 9 people agreed with them. I run a Discord server for around 30 people and DM 4 different games a week for my players. Most of my players are extremely nice and friendly. Handpicking a group of people is the best thing about DMing, besides a small group of people who aren't so nice and friendly. My first game I ran was for 5 people, and me being new to DMing, I decided to just pick whoever wanted to play. This caused the next 10 sessions to be a chaotic mess, but that's another horror story. After a few of my actual good players in other groups convinced me to disband the group and look to run my campaign for another group, I did. I thought they weren't bad people, so I let them talk on my server, but I was not planning on inviting them to any of my other games, besides one who was playing in my new group. He's the only player I actually liked. Fast forward a few days, and I have pinpointed 2 groups. A group that I handpicked myself and a group of 5 looking for a DM. With the huge influx of new people, this caused a small active community to form, and most of the active people are friends. There was one critical mistake I made though, and that was planning 4 games back to back to back daily. After working on all 4 games for hours, I just told my Friday players I just didn't have a finished game for them and wanted to readjust the game for a few days. Everyone understood, most joke/memed on how many games I run weekly in the first place. I decided to make it up to them and offer a moving night of watching Carmen Rider, and it was a really good time. When everyone left, I got a DM from one of my old players that I didn't really like in the first place. He essentially accused me of picking favorites with groups, he wasn't in one, lol, and how I was a lazy DM for having a mental health day for myself and everyone else. He rambled on how I spend money for homebrew for 3 groups instead of the 5-player group from before. I told them that they were not invited to my games again, and little did I know he was messaging other people saying I was a bad DM and they should join his server instead. Immediately, I got like 4 messages from my players about them and banned them from my server and reported them to the mods in the server we found them from. TLDR, jealous player gets mad I like a group of 15 more than them after they disrupted my game. Dropping players from your game is a difficult decision to make, but sometimes the decision just has to be made. If a DM isn't enjoying running the game, then the game isn't going to be good, quite frankly, and sometimes it's better for DMs and players just to split. But split is definitely what I mean. If you keep on harassing people to let you back into the group or just being a general dick to them, you're not going to get anything out of it. It's a complete waste of time. Basically, don't be like this guy. Also, if you are running 4 games back to back to back to back to back, you absolutely deserve a mental health day. I can barely run 2 games back to back. 4, it would be way too much. So yeah, take breaks, guys. No matter who calls you lazy, just take breaks. It is really important. And if one of your D&D group calls you lazy for that, well, you might want to consider that they shouldn't be part of your D&D group anymore. I was invited to play an online D&D game by a guy who wanted to run D&D for the first time. He was playing in my first D&D game, so I thought, sure, why not? I was also trying to get more games in as I had just quit my previous group. Perhaps a tale for another time. Before starting, he told us to roll up at least 2 characters since the campaign he was running was brutal and had some high potential for character death. This raised a red flag for me, but I decided to give him the benefit of the doubt. He proceeded to run a rather infamous D&D module about a dragon monarch in the most unforgiving way possible. He was basically just trying to kill off our characters as much and as often as he possibly could. He would rule lawyer our characters, attempting to give him the highest advantage while also minimizing any advantage we possibly had. In situations where we started to get the upper hand, he would deus ex machina in more enemies or set up encounters attempting to railroad us into death traps. Role-playing was pretty much non-existent, and it was just combat encounter after combat encounter. There were also quite a few players. 6, 7 including the DM, and combat ended up lasting sometimes 30 plus minutes a round, to the point where I would just put on a TV show to watch in between turns, as most of the other players took a good 5 minutes to decide that they were going to make the same move they made the previous turn. My friend and I, me, a warlock tiefling, and him, a bard, were the only characters to continually survive. We actually made a side game out of surviving as long as possible. I'm proud to say I quit the campaign before my character even died. Sadly, they were killed off in the next session, as reported by my bard friend. This and my previous campaign taught me a valuable lesson in leaving badly DM'd groups, and some lessons in how not to run campaigns. Seriously guys, don't treat D&D like a power trip, whether you be a player or a DM, but especially if you're the DM. The DM's job isn't to beat the players. The DM's job is to create tension, to create difficulty. It is a plus that the DM established early on that this was going to be a brutal campaign, but the DM basically turning it into a slog fest is not good. Even if you establish early on that your campaign is going to be bad, that still means the campaign is bad. I'm not trying to say brutal campaigns are bad, but the way this campaign was run clearly wasn't great. Just having 30 plus minute rounds is not fun. The combat needs to be exhilarating. There has to be some sort of thrill there. That's the point of difficulty. If said difficulty just turns it into a slog, then there's not much point of it at all. To boil it down, don't turn D&D into a power trip. That's not what it's supposed to be. It's supposed to be fun, whether it be role-playing or combat. So this happened in a campaign I played in a year or two ago. For a bit of context, I was the only girl in a group of 5. I've been friends with all of them for at least a year or longer at this point, and this was my first ever campaign. The world that our campaign was set in is completely homebrew, and requires us all to work with the DM very closely when creating our characters. In this world, there is a very strong caste system. The others all play characters somewhere between the lower middle and higher middle class. DM asked me if I mind playing a lower class character. I was a little weary of this specific request, but I agreed and we came up with a character that I was pretty happy with and excited to play. A Kenku warlock who, while a slave, was in charge of running the other slaves that did manual labor. I intended to play them as a gruff, cranky character, but with regrets, and a wish to escape the system he'd been forced into at a young age. Important to note that I wanted to play a male character because I thought a female character in this situation just screams bad idea in my mind. However, when the DM introduces my character, it's not the grizzled slave master of the field, but instead as the meek, female sex slave of the prince. I was thoroughly thrown through a loop, but I managed to recover and play out the rest of the campaign. Why would you bother recovering? Why? I'd walk. Anyway, he did try and push romance on my character late in the campaign, but I decided she was asexual after that and had no desire for anything. He eventually dropped it. The DM was honestly not bad overall, but he had a habit of throwing out whatever your backstory was and replacing it as he saw fit mid-game. For instance, he had our gunslinger murder their parents as a child, when originally he grew up poor but with loving parents, and at the end of our months-long campaign, he made us abandon the planet we had been trying to save, leaving everyone on it to die? I know it's not the worst story, but it's my 2 cents. I've been playing many other campaigns since then, and I haven't talked to him as a DM since. This one is pretty bad. Look, don't do this. Number 1, changing player backstories is never good. Number 2, changing them into something that could make them uncomfortable is really, really bad. That is not good. Don't do it, especially without telling them. According to the comments, the player and the DM were literally talking about this. They discussed the backstory, and the DM just burst this out mid-game. That is not good. Also, pushing romance, not good. Look, here's the bottom line. Don't do things that make your players uncomfortable. You don't know what people are okay and not okay with, so it's always good to talk to them, and clearly this DM did not do that. It is important not just to respect the characters, but the players as well. Alright, and I suppose that's it. So if you guys enjoyed this episode of RPG Horror Stories, then please do hit that like button. If you want to see more episodes of this series, as well as my other content, then please do subscribe to Crispy's Tavern. And finally, if you want to leave your own stories or thoughts, go down to the comments down below. In essence, like, comment, subscribe. I will see you all next time. Farewell.